Hello everyone, my name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. You may hear a little bit of background noise because it is a balmy 88 degrees here. And I turned off the air conditioning a little bit earlier for an interview, and it was so hot and stuffy at the end, I was kind of low-key dying. So I am prioritizing my physical comfort over your ears. Sorry in advance. I also want to say the reason why I'm wearing headphones this week and the reason why I'm being so careful is last week, for some reason that I've only sort of begun to suss out, the NewsHour had no audio. It was very strange. Didn't make a lot of sense. And it was the coding error, I think, was so bad some sites wouldn't even play it. It was a mess. So, this week, we're going back old school. Headphones on, I'm double checking audio inputs, making sure everything is good. Oh, excuse me. If you are watching and you are hearing something, make sure to let me know. If you're not hearing something, please also let me know. And hopefully this week will be okay. In any case, it was a long... I had a lot of fun last week. I did. The NewsHour thing with the whole audio thing was annoying, and it felt like a bit of a setback, and, you know, you get all those emotions. But last Tuesday, I went to the beach with some friends. That was a grand old time. I really enjoyed getting out and getting some fun in the sun. That was so much fun. It was a great adventure. It was awesome. I also, but the downside of that was that Tuesday is my day with my least amount of meetings, and usually I don't have very many appointments, and so I usually catch up on a lot of tasks, and I get a lot of stuff done, and, well, I didn't do any of that, and so that just kind of metastasized into the whole week. And I would say, well, you know, I'll just catch up on the weekend. Well, I had a thing on Saturday, too, and so I was playing hooky last week, and as I wrote to someone who was asking me where an email reply was, I said I'm living in the consequences of my own actions. So this week, it is nose to the grindstone. Can you believe it's the 28th of July? Like, it's almost August. Like, we're already talking about fall. I'm making orders for books for the Christmas holiday season. Oh my goodness. Just so much is happening. The summer just seems to have flown by. We were in May hoping for sun. We got sun. Now it's hot. Now it's the end of July, and you know, and now we're already talking about fall, and it's overwhelming. But we're not there yet. We're only at the beginning of August. We still have some hot and steamy days of August left to go. I always remembered growing up in Colorado, and certainly in Arkansas, August was always the hottest time. And that was always, I was trying to fix that big sort of, there we go, that big sort of bald spot that I had going because I had my hair done, and now it's sticking out. That looks much better. The headphones pull, scalp gets seen, it's a whole thing. Anyway, and now we're already at the beginning of August, and it's just, and 2025 is well over half over, which is just crazy. But yeah, so if you're on my LinkedIn followers, I will be getting out a new business newsletter to you very, very soon, but keep following my feed for great updates. If you've not signed up for the Cameron Journal newsletter, you should. Last Saturday, I did basically a single article about Tulsi Gabbard, the 2016 election. We're going to talk more about that. The Obama administration intelligence thing, and the whole distraction from the Epstein case. I wrote about that quite extensively in Saturday's newsletter. So if that's the type of content you're interested in, you need to sign up for the newsletter at CameronJoel.com/newsletter. And if you really want to support this journalism, and Lord knows I could use the support right now, please, 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 if you haven't, sign up for Cameron Journal Plus. It's $5 a month. It's the cost of a coffee. And you'll get everything that you're used to getting, but you get to support journalism, and you get to be part of the new community I'm building of dedicated Cameron Journal subscribers. Discord, we have Discord available. We're going to start doing some private chats, private online events. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you haven't thought about signing up for Cameron Journal Plus, please do so at CameronJournal.com/subscribe. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, yes, and I do want to mention, which I haven't mentioned in a long time, well, two kind of new things are happening. One is old and one is new. The old thing is that I haven't talked about it in a little while, but my writing courses are still available. I know a lot of people who watch this probably don't always watch the author interviews, especially the fiction author interviews, even though I think you should, because we have interesting conversation. But if you are interested in writing a book, interested in writing coaching, anything like that, please make sure to check out the Cameron Journal Academy. We're currently offering a Plato course with Dan Sanderson. We're also offering both of my writing courses, The Power of Story. So if you are interested in writing a book, you should check those out. We have both fiction and nonfiction tracks for that course, which is really, really exciting. I've not talked about those in a while, but you should check those out if you're interested in writing a book, think you could write a book, all this type of thing. You do get 2 private writing courses with me, which is really a lot of fun. Then the other thing I want to mention, the new thing, of course, is America's Lost Generation. So my next book, America's Lost Generation, is coming out very shortly. We are done with production. We're into the pre-order phase, all this sort of thing. And we're very excited about it. I'm very excited about it. This book has been a long time in coming. For some reason, I take forever to write a book. I would be more prolific and all this type of thing, but it just doesn't quite happen that way. Anyway, this book has been taking 5 years to get done and out into the world, and we're very excited. Right now on the Cameron Journal, there is a great collection called the Millennials Collection that has everything I've written about millennials and new material in support of the book. America's Lost Generation is all about the story of millennials. What happened, how the goalposts moved, how millennials and why they have struggled, especially as we all get into middle age, because the youngest of us is now over 30. The oldest of us is in their mid-40s. So we're now reaching, kind of the middle of the story, and I want to talk about why things have gone the way they've gone and really dig in to that story, and this book is the perfect place for it. So if you want to check out my insights about just the milieu of being a millennial, the narratives, the dialogue, the book features lots of facts. It features looking at another similar crisis in Japan and how that affected Japanese society and how it's affected American society and contrast those. But most importantly, it features real-life interviews from people from the Lost Generation subreddit on Reddit. I collected those way back in 2020. I kind of wonder where all of those people are now and how they're feeling, especially post-pandemic, because we didn't really realize how bad things were going to get at the time. But we're very excited to have all that out into the world, and the book is now available on pre-order at CameronJournal.com/Camerons-books, or just go to CameronJournal.com. There's a button that says Shop Cameron's Books. Click that. It's the first one, and it's on sale right now for $14.95 if you pre-order. So that's very exciting. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll be getting the complete collection from the Complete Millennials collection delivered into your inbox. There's all sorts of new exciting content that's based upon stuff from the book coming out. It took me a long time to put it together, but it's very exciting, and you can also pre-order directly from any of those articles as well. So that's all the housekeeping. That's all the exciting stuff going on around here. I had a lot of fun with friends and meeting new people and going to the beach, but yeah, this week I've got to get a lot of stuff done. I'm so behind. I haven't been doing my Twitter threads. I haven't been talking about some of the interviews we've had. I'm just behind in so many ways. So for now, though, you've come to hear about the news, and I will deliver that for you. So let's turn to the headlines. And we're going to do this. And we're going to do that. And we're not going to start with that story. We're going to start with this story. So one of the kind of quiet stories that has not been getting nearly enough attention is this story from Newsweek. Well, it's not originally from Newsweek, but we're going to read it from Newsweek. It's a story about the Donald Trump plan to send the U.S. homeless to treatment centers. They're all paying concentration camps, but I'll hold back. Let's read together first. A new Trump executive order called Ending Vagrancy and Restoring Order They always couch it in these terms. Will instruct Attorney General Pam Bondi to overturn judicial precedents and terminate consent decrees that currently restrict local and state authorities from relocating homeless people from streets and encampments or tent cities into rehabilitation, treatment, or other facilities. We should always be concerned about other facilities. The executive order will redirect federal funding to ensure homeless people are transferred to rehabilitation, treatment, and other facilities. The order also aims to stop sex offenders receiving homelessness assistance from being housed with children and allows programs to house women and children exclusively. In 2024, the Department of Housing and Urban Development reported 771,480 homeless persons in the U.S. The agency also reported 167,991 chronically homeless persons. And those numbers are always problematic because they do the single night count thing. Those numbers are probably much higher. Under the order, Bondi will work alongside the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, and Transportation to prioritize federal grants to cities and states that, quote, enforce prohibitions on open illicit drug use, urban camping and loitering, and urban squatting, and track the location of sex offenders. In a statement sent to Newsweek, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said Trump is, quote, delivering on his commitment to make America safe again and end homelessness across America. Well, you're not really ending homelessness, you're just sending them somewhere else, which is usually what we do with the homeless anyway. In March, Trump signed an executive order directing the National Park Service to, quote, beautify Washington, D.C. and clear homeless encampments on federal lands. In May, he signed an executive order to establish the National Center for Warrior Independence, a place where homeless veterans can go to receive care, benefits, and services. In June of last year, U.S. Supreme Court upheld laws restricting encampments on public property in Grants Pass, Oregon. The ruling was 6-3 with Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Eleni Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissenting. The majority found that the restrictions did not classify as, quote, cruel and unusual punishment, quote, under the Eighth Amendment. There's another half of this story that we're going to get to from a great Substack, but the reality of this is that I kind of already have been commenting as we wrote. These numbers are, again, very inaccurate because they do the single night count. How that works is they pick a single night of the year, they go out, they have people go out nationwide, they count everyone who's homeless and unhoused, and that's the number. The reality is that number is almost irrelevant the second it's taken. You have to, people sometimes come in and out of homelessness. Some people move around, can get counted, twice, not counted at all. If you do the count on Tuesday and you're on the street Wednesday night, you're a homeless person, but you haven't been counted. So that's kind of the first problem here. The other problem is reprioritizing federal funds. This is, I think, really to force blue states and blue cities who don't enforce this stuff to start enforcing this sort of thing. The only part of this that I think probably isn't weird is stopping sex offenders receiving homeless assistance from being housed with children and allows programs to house women and children exclusively. That, I think, we can probably backfire, but this also ends up with, if we're moving them into rehabilitation, treatment, or other facilities, how many people are just going to end up in some facility somewhere? And this is rightly being marketed as getting rid of the infrastructure that shut down insane asylums and mental hospitals and things like that in the 1980s. And I think the reality is people are going to end up being... some people will end up being housed in these facilities permanently, which gets us right into the second half of the story, which is from mindwar.com. They have a great Substack, and it's called Taking Action, Trump's Plan to Disappear the Work Shy. We're staring into the abyss of systematic mass cleansing that mankind might not recover from without intervention. And it says here, I wrote yesterday that Donald Trump's spiraling psychology has been fused into U.S. levers of power to the point that the entire government, and in many ways the entire nation, is decompensating as a result. He might do almost anything. While his latest move is not a false flag per se, in most ways it's worse. Trump is quite literally pulling a page out of the Nazi playbook to target unhoused and mentally ill people to feed into the maw of his Fourth Reich. In his latest executive order, ending crime and disorder on America's streets is one of the darkest things I've ever read, and yeah, that's saying a lot. It doesn't even try to hide its purpose or disdain for its targets. It's not about helping anyone, it's about cleaning up the streets. The first sentence. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. This is the exact type of propaganda that has been used by countless dictators when they want to target a vulnerable group, but this order has a particular disdain for substance abusers, the unhoused, and the mentally ill. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor their other citizens. My administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. Civil commitment is a euphemism for being kidnapped and put in a warehouse with a bunch of potentially dangerous people against your will. Public order is a euphemism for a neo-Nazi white 1950s faux image of America that Trump thinks he can restore to who the strongman his cult wants to believe in. But in reality, this is a carbon copy of Action T4, the eugenics and euthanasia program that represented the initial test for the Holocaust. The Action Arbeitsschulreich, a campaign to emulate the work shy, were among the group of asocials classified as preventive criminals. Those detained under the status of preventive criminals were not limited to the work shy, but used in arrests much more broadly, as implementing directive of the Reich Criminal Code in April 1938 defined asocial as any person who showed continual misconduct or repeated violations of the law who did not fit into the community and submit to the self-evident order the Nazi state desired. These particularly were vagrants, beggars, prostitutes, gypsies, and alcoholics. Even people with untreated venereal diseases were included as well. The Nazis murdered over 300,000 asocials between 1939 and 1941 when they turned their primary focus to the extermination of the Jews and Roma. In Trump's order, the DOJ is instructed to reverse judicial precedents and consent decrees that limit civil commitment of unhoused individuals deemed dangerous or incapable of self-care. In other words, the regime wants to take away the First and Fourth Amendment for people they deem to be unfit. They want to remove due process from people that Trump and Stephen Miller believe are unworthy and disappear them through deportation, incarceration, or institutionalization. Hitler and Goebbels framed their genocide on ideas like cleansing the Volk of the life unworthy of life to improve national hygiene. Trump and Miller restoring public order, ending chaos, liberating communities from invasion. Hitler and Goebbels. Initial targets were the mentally ill, disabled, institutionalized, chronically homeless, people with STDs, and quote-unquote work shy. Trump and Miller. Unhoused, mentally ill, undocumented immigrants, drug users, loiterers, sex offenders. Hitler and Goebbels called their targets asocial, parasites, useless eaters, degenerates. Trump and Stephen Miller called them illegals, invasion, infestation, migrant mobs, and filth. The parallels are stark and blatant. However, at the risk of making the scenario worse, consider the net impact of Trump's BBB cuts in addition to this order. Medicaid is losing $860 billion in cuts over the next 10 years. SNAP is losing $295 billion in cuts over the same period, up to 17 million additional uninsured. If Trump wanted to lessen homelessness or improve the overall mental health of the nation, this is precisely the opposite of what he would have done. No, I'm afraid the vision is far worse. This is a mass cleansing of America, the intentional creation of a crisis and the ritual sacrifice of scapegoats to solve it in order to rationalize a Palantir-processed, ICE-enforced purge of undesirables. And he goes on for a bit, and we're not going to get into all of that, but as someone who has a diagnosable mental illness, this is quite frightening. There has been, not just in the Nazi period, but throughout time, a program to get rid of anyone people don't like. Now, the thing about living in a constitutional republic is even if you're not doing well, you are supposed to have rights. One of the reasons we closed the mental institutions in the 1980s was because they tended to be poorly funded and they tended to be places of abuse. The downside is that there was no place to take people who need to be warehoused, whose families can't, or in many cases won't, take care of them. I have said in the past, it might not be a terrible idea to bring back mental institutions at a certain level, better funded with better inspections and oversight, to put people who need to be warehoused, particularly, I think people with schizophrenia, I think are probably, really struggle, and it doesn't even have to be an institution. It can be supportive housing. I've known people that live in supportive housing where there's someone kind of actively looking after them, but they live mostly independent lives. You also could have, people where they are living in a more communal setting, and people are minding and looking after them, and they can maybe transition to supportive housing at some point. I think there's a way to do this with humanity and dignity. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. I think it's going to be a mass roundup of anyone that they don't like, or anyone who's homeless, which could be, anyone if the life goes the wrong way, and just stash them away somewhere. One of the biggest complaints I hear people make online is that, cities are unsafe, there's there's unhoused people, there's crazy people, no one wants to be around that, people are afraid. And so I think people look at this and say, well, yeah, get the weirdos off the street and we can, live in a safe society. The problem with that whole idea is they forget those are human beings too. And unfortunately, when there's no one to really care about those people or care where they go or what happens to them, it means anyone can do anything to them. And as Jim Stewartson here points out, the Nazis started with the people easy to get rid of. The mentally ill, the quote-unquote work-shy, the homeless, people with STDs. That, everyone's kind of like, well, sure. They're kind of a nuisance. We'll all feel better with them gone somewhere. And then it always turns to someone else. And someone else, and someone else, and someone else. And that's the sad situation, is that once you kind of start down this road, it never just stops with the initial quote-unquote undesirable group. And again, if it was we're going to work with community organizations to fund them better, even religious organizations, to help, create supportive housing for people and have them live as best productive lives as they, can or want to, that would be one thing. But the terminology with all of this is so, as he does the comparison, is just so dangerous. And this idea that, that there's the unhoused, mentally ill, undocumented immigrants, drug users, ending the chaos, restoring public order, liberating communities from invasion, infestation, migrant mobs, and filth. All of this is, it's very dangerous language to describe real people. And I think one of the sad things is neoliberalism did a very good job of getting rid of the notion of society. And that we have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to society. And society also has a responsibility to us. It is an exchange. And unfortunately, when people atomize themselves to be hyper-individualistic, we quit thinking of other people outside of ourselves as part of our society, as part of our country, of people we have to think about and consider. And I think that the dangerous thing is that when you can other a certain group, certain people, it makes it very easy to do very terrible things to them. And we have lots of psychological data on this. And so this is a very dangerous step. And I wanted to make this the lead story tonight because the unfortunate reality is that this will start happening very quickly. ICE has a $140 billion budget. By budget, they are, I think, the world's 16th best funded military, ahead of the nation of Italy. And that means they now have the legal framework, the money, and the resources to just start rounding anyone up that they deem undesirable. And the reality is as this goes on, this could be anyone. And so if you are, have a mental health diagnosis or whatever have you, there's really nothing stopping them from rounding you up too. And in that case, that includes me. So I take this a little bit personally. But so that's why I wanted to lead to the story tonight, to understand what we're facing. This is a new chapter in authoritarianism, and it's something that should be quite frightening. Because it's very easy to be like, oh, but it's someone else. It's the crazy person doing drugs on the sidewalk. And believe me, I lived in downtown Seattle for 3 years of my 10 years that I lived in Seattle. When the first time I ever drove into Seattle, way back in 2014, I turned into a Wendy's to have lunch and I saw a guy relieving himself in a bush. Both ends. That was my welcome to Seattle. I have lived near Seattle's biggest open-air drug market. My car was broken into 3 times. I remember the lady who used to sit on the couch in front of the King County Courthouse and smoke crack all day. they had to actually put up fencing and put guards around to keep people away because they were accosting judges and plaintiffs outside the courthouse. I know how bad it can get. I've lived there, you know, and in a not great neighborhood. There's a way to do this that's incredibly productive. I don't trust this language or this administration to do that in a way that's not going to irreparably harm people. And that should all give us a great deal of pause about what this is going to mean moving forward for everyone in society, and who it might extend to. Okay, you'll get a few people off the streets, and things will seem safer and quieter. Who's next? What's next? These things are so broad that it can begin to start to apply to everyone. And that's where the comparison with Action T4 and the Nuts in the Holocaust and, you know, protectively all start to become a part of this idea of, like, there are some people in society that just need to be gotten rid of. They're not people anymore. They're a problem. And that's what makes this so incredibly dangerous. This article is a little hyperbolic. That's why I started with the Newsweek article, so we can get our mind around it. But it's worth mentioning. It is going to be, mark my words, this is going to turn into a problem. There's going to be stories of people being forcibly taken away who don't need to be, and by the time you get to that point, it will already be far too late. Let's move on. Oh yes, this article is good. We're not going to cover that right now. I do love this article. If we have time, we'll come back to it. I might do it next week. This one we did not cover last week, and I'm going to cover it right now. Mostly because this is something that the Trump administration is doing that I'm actually not sad about. So, this is originally from Forbes. New Trump immigration policy ending the H-1B visa lottery. I'm not sad about this. I'll just put that right out there right now. The H-1B system has been abused by the tech companies for so long, it's embarrassing. It really is. It's quite embarrassing. And the fact that nothing has ever been done to curb the tech companies using and abusing the H-1B system is terrible. And this one I'm kind of glad of. Let's read about it. The Trump administration plans to publish a proposed rule to end or significantly change the annual H-1B visa lottery. Near the end of Donald Trump's first term, the administration proposed ending the current random selection process used each year when H-1B registrations exceed the annual limit of 65,000 plus a 20,000 exemption for individuals with an advanced degree from a U.S. university. In its place, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services would have awarded H-1B petitions based on salary from highest to lowest. Commenters warned the rule violated the statute and would disadvantage recent international students and other early career professionals. The Office of Management and Budget is reviewing the rule and could clear it for publication within weeks. The new immigration rule, same as the old rule. On January 8, 2021, the Department of Homeland Security published its final rule to modify its process for selecting H-1B petitions when registrations surpassed the annual limit of 85,000. The Biden administration initially delayed and then ultimately chose not to implement the rule. In the final rule in 2021, DHS described the new selection process. USCIS will rank and select petitions received on the basis of the highest occupational employment statistics wage level that proffered wage equals or exceeds the relevant standard occupational classification code in the area of intended employment, beginning with OES wage level 4, proceeding in descending order with OES wage levels 3, 2, and 1. Employers normally pay higher salaries to more senior employees, level 3 experienced, level 4 fully competent, as indicated in the labor condition application. Recent international students and other individuals starting their careers are typically paid at level 1 and level 2. Those are the minimum required salaries, and actual pay is often higher. According to DHS, under its proposed system, USCIS would not have selected anybody paid at level 1 for the regular cap or advanced degree exemption. USCIS would have chosen only 20% of individuals at level 2 for the 20,000 advanced degree exemption and 75% of level 2 registrants for the 65,000 regular cap, or about 50% combined, according to DHS data. DHS based its analysis on far fewer registrations than the 343,981 eligible registrations USCIS received for fiscal year 2026. That means that with enough filings for level 3 and level 4 registrants, individuals paid at level 2 would be shut out from obtaining H-1B petitions. In 2021, a National Foundation for American Policy analysis found that an international student may be 54% more likely to get an H-1B petition under the current H-1B lottery or registration system than under the Trump administration's rule that would have ended the H-1B lottery. The analysis was based on examining actual cases of recent international students and H-1B petition filings obtained from an immigration law firm. Approximately 90% of recent international student cases examined were paid at Level 1 or Level 2. It remains unclear whether the new rule will be identical to the final rule published in 2021. If so, the same arguments of supporters and opponents will apply. It is also possible the rule will differ substantively, but still produce the same result, i.e. disadvantage international students, early career professionals, and people employed in less highly compensated jobs. The only clue so far is the titles for the two rules differ. DHS called the final rule published in January 2021 Modification of Registration Requirement for Petitioners Seeking to File Cap Subject H-1B Petitions. However, the title of the new rule under review at OMB is Weighted Selection Process for Registrants and Petitioners Seeking to File Cap Subject H-1B Petitions. Weighting would suggest giving a higher probability of being selected for certain applicants, but everyone would still get some chance of being selected, said economist Mark Regatz, a senior fellow at NFAAP. Weighting implies that the USCIS will still conduct a lottery, but for example, if weighted solely by salary, an H-1B applicant with a proposed salary of $200,000 per year would have twice the chance of being selected as an applicant who earns $100,000 annually. And it goes on to some other technical things that we will not dig into at the moment. Obviously, the biggest thing is recruiting that young talent, and it says here, experts also warned the rule would likely put the United States at a disadvantage in recruiting talent. Bo Cooper, a partner at Fragleman Law Firm and a former general counsel at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, said in 2021 that the rule would establish a U.S. government policy a priority for recruiting individuals who are already senior professionals, even though nearly all of America's competitors for talent focus on attracting young talent, particularly recent university graduates. The rule would have disfavored several significant occupations. NFAP identified 11 occupations, including physicians, internists, pediatricians, dentists, and computer and information systems managers, where individuals paid Level 1 salaries would be unable to obtain an H-1B petition under the rule, even though their Level 1 salaries were higher than the median salary for Level 3 in all occupations. The rule would also make it much less likely that physicists, microbiologists, and medical scientists, among others, could gain H-1B petitions. More than half of the labor condition applications for those occupations in fiscal year 2019 were for Level 1, and close to 90% were paid at Level 1 or Level 2. Middle schools and high schools, which are not at cap exempt, would struggle to hire math and science teachers, as approximately 90% are paid Level 1 or Level 2. And it's saying focusing on salary alone isn't fair. I don't know. I still think it's a good idea. Simply because there are so many people struggling to find work. There are so many professions that seem to be a closed shop. I think tightening up how many people are coming to this country, getting education, getting jobs. I mean, I suppose if you're in a field with a genuine shortage, you can apply for an appeal and an exemption from the system. But there are so many reports of people with not being able to find jobs, and this has gone on for years and years. It seems like I think we have to shut off the spigot, folks. I do. I feel like we've got to shut off the spigot a little bit. Now, when it comes to jobs Americans do not want to do, meatpacking, agriculture, that's a different story. We need a new program for that, by the way. We don't really have one. We should get one. But we're talking about jobs Americans can do, will, want, and pay well. And so having a new influx of, 65, really 85,000 new workers and everything every year makes it a very, I would want to make sure that we're employing our own people first in these jobs. These are the jobs people go to school for. These are the jobs Americans can do well, where we can lead the world. I don't necessarily know that we need a ton of influx of new young graduates every year at 85,000 a year when you have people who can't find jobs on their own. I think there's an opportunity here to actually prioritize, existing citizens who are graduating into these fields first. And then, and only then, should we then have immigration to those fields or inviting some people to stay or whatever have you. It seems counterintuitive, but this is one area of immigration policy I'm in favor of kind of turning it down, especially because, as I said, the tech industry is notorious for using and abusing. Just right now, Microsoft has laid off 9,000 people. They put in 14,000 H-1B applications. No! Hire back the 9,000 people. If you're laying 9,000 people off, you don't need 14,000 new people. You do if you want to lower your labor cost. And that's the key. That's always the key. And I've always said this about immigration over and over and over and over again. We will never solve immigration in this country until we until we get corporate America off the teat of cheap labor. It's that simple. Corporate America is addicted to cheap labor to improve their profit margins. They're trying to make more money off of just of pressing down labor costs. And so people wonder why no one has money, they can't get a job, jobs don't pay anymore, hard work doesn't pay off. This is part of it. This is part of the story. As uncomfortable as it may be, this is part of the story, and it's part of the problem. It's time to shut off the spigot. Simple as. And I wanted to cover this story because we didn't get to it last week, and it's very important. It's time to shut off the spigot. Now, speaking of the economy, Goldman Sachs is getting worried about the economy. Oh, can I even get into this article? I think not. Well, that's okay. Goldman Sachs is getting worried about the economy because of consumer spending, was what the article was about. So, that's fine. We'll move on because we have this one right here. Now, this thread was very interesting. Speaking of weak and soft economies, it says here, this man is a police officer who makes $70,000 per year. He says after taxes he gets about $4,000 per month, but one-bedroom apartments are all $2,400 per month in his area. Mortgages are even more. After bills, he has nothing left. He's moved back in with his parents and sees no future. Quote, and honestly, I'm discouraged. I have a decent job. My job is inherently kind of dangerous. And before you're like, well, you can work overtime in details. Yeah, dude, I don't want to work my life away. I have a lot of things I like to do outside of my job. I want to spend time with my family and hopefully have my own family someday. And I want to actually see my kids. I just feel like I'm effed. The cost of housing is a national emergency in America, and nobody in power seems to care. Sadly, here's the sad part, is no one in the comments was very sympathetic to his plight. Yeah, like nobody really, I mean, it's, it's all about, the first comment, if you worked overtime, you'd make double his money, probably. Yeah, but his point about not working his life away is certainly well taken. And then you have lots of, we need to deport this many illegals. We have, this is a structural issue. Salaries have not kept up with the cost of housing. Simple as. And when you have a public servant who cannot afford housing, and he probably is required to live in the city where he's an officer, that's going to be a huge problem. And I'm very mindful, years ago, I was attending an economics conference. Well, I wasn't attending it. I was running it. It was part of my job. I was going to this conference because of someplace I worked. And this guy stood on the stage and he was talking about how good, and it was about the Seattle area. He was talking about how good the Puget Sound economy was and things were growing and we were building new housing. And he said, he's like, the concern I have, and this was in 2017. He said, the concern I have is that we're not building workforce housing. We're not building the type of housing that firefighters, police officers, and teachers can afford. And he's like, I don't know in 10 years where the workforce for this city is going to live. And we're now not quite 10 years away from that. We're 8 years away from that. We're seeing the result. Now, this man isn't from Seattle, so I'm not saying this is a Seattle problem. But wherever he lives, and we don't really, I watched the video, he doesn't really say where he lives. He's making an okay salary, but with that rent, it's impossible. That's more than half your income. So you're going to be with a roommate. You decide to get in with family, which is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. No judgment on any of that. But the reality is, to his point, if he wants to have a wife and a family, the math's not mathin'. This is the structural issue in the economy today. The only thing he can really do, and it would probably be really tough because of, parents and family and all this type of thing, is look to a smaller, medium-sized city, probably in the middle of the country, where they're desperate for police officers, and make a little bit less, where housing prices are a little bit less crazy, and maybe find something, but even that's not a guarantee anymore. The cheap places are kind of all gone, especially since the pandemic. That's about all he could do, and even that isn't a guarantee. But when the police officers are talking about the cost of housing, we have a structural issue. And yeah, nobody in power seems to care. This is a huge problem. I wish people were more sympathetic in the comments, but it's a lot of, if he's in his 20s, he needs to shut up and work overtime to make things happen. It's like, that's, I mean, that's a nice idea, but how, down the road, he's going to have exponential salary increases to be able to afford having a family of his own. And when you feel you can't make it on $70 per year, that's, and I know this story. I was not able to actually live in Seattle until I made $75,000 a year. And then I chose a very inexpensive apartment in an old building. I literally walked into the leasing office and I said, "What's the apartment that no one wants that you can never rent? I'm here to rent it." And I saved hundreds. But still, I mean, but that's the reality. And even then, after, other bills and everything else, it was a tight, every month was, very careful. I couldn't get too loosey-goosey with expenses or anything. It was all very like, okay, we have to be super careful. And that was 10 years ago. Not quite. Like 7 years ago. Almost 10 years ago. It's worse now. This is a structural issue in our economy. And until we solve this housing issue particularly, we're going to be struggling economically, and Goldman Sachs will be writing more articles that I can't read on CNBC about how bad the economy is. All right, we're coming up to the top of the hour. This was another story that we didn't get to last week, and that was about Jeffrey Epstein's little black book. And this is from Mother Jones. I love Mother Jones. If you don't know the story of Mother Jones and her advocacy in the American labor movement, you should go research that. I probably should do a video on Mother Jones someday, but you should. But they named this magazine after her. And it says, "I called everyone in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book. What I learned about rich people, conspiracy, genius, Ghislaine stand-up comedy, and evil from 2,000 phone calls," by Leland Nally. This was back in October of 2020. We're not going to read this whole thing because it's long, but we're going to read some excerpts. And we'll start with the first couple paragraphs, and we'll go to the good bits. It says here, "Jeffrey Epstein's little black book is one of the most cursed documents ever compiled in this miserable, dying country. Totaling 97 pages and containing the names, numbers, and addresses of a considerable cross-section of the global elite, Epstein's personal contact book first turned up in a courtroom in 2009 after his former butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, tried to sell it to lawyers representing Epstein's victims for $50,000. Rodriguez described the book, apparently assembled by Epstein's employees, as, quote, the Holy Grail. It is annotated with cryptic marginalia, stars next to certain entries, arrows pointing towards others, and names of at least 38 people are circled for reasons that aren't totally clear. There are 1,571 names in all, with roughly 5,000 phone numbers and thousands of emails and home addresses. There are celebrities, princes, princesses, high-profile scientists, artists from all over the world, all alongside some of the world's most powerful oligarchs and political leaders. People like Prince Andrew, circled. Ehud Barak, circled. Donald Trump, circled. Rodriguez was Epstein's butler at his Palm Beach mansion for many years. He was intimately familiar with his boss's sexual proclivities. He claimed to have seen nude underage girls at Epstein's pool, said that he would routinely wipe down and stow away sex toys in Epstein's room after quote-unquote massages, and alleged that he saw child pornography on Epstein's personal computer. In 2011, Rodriguez was sentenced to 18 months in prison for having tried to sell the book to an undercover agent after failing to notify investigators about its existence. Rodriguez said in court that the book was, quote, insurance, unquote, against Epstein, who wanted him to disappear. Rodriguez died of mesothelioma shortly after serving his sentence. And I love this pull quote. I sat on my couch and phoned up royalty, spoke to ambassadors, irritated a senior advisor at Blackstone, and left squeaky voicemails for what must constitute a considerable percentage of the world oligarchy. And it says that Epstein's little black book isn't little at all. It's gargantuan. Its defining feature is its size and thoroughness. There are just as many boring numbers as exciting ones for every Jordanian princess. There are 3 reflexologists from Boca. The listings are at times preposterously detailed, often containing additional names and numbers for people's emergency contacts, their parents, their siblings, their friends, even their children, all alongside hundreds of car phones, yacht phones, guest houses, and private office lines. Some individuals have dozens of numbers and addresses listed, while others just a single number and first name. Epstein collected people, and if you ever had any interaction with him or Ghislaine Maxwell, his one-time girlfriend and alleged accomplice, you more than likely ended up in this book, and then several years later you received a call from me. I made close to 2,000 phone calls total. I spoke to billionaires, CEOs, bankers, models, celebrities, scientists, a Kennedy, and some of Epstein's closest friends and confidants. I sat on my couch and phoned up royalty, spoke to ambassadors, irritated a senior advisor at Blackstone, and left squeaky voicemails for what constituted a considerable percentage of the world oligarchy. At times, the book felt like a dark palantir, giving me glimpses of dreadful, haunted dimensions that my soft, gentle animal being was never supposed to encounter. At other times, it was merely the opposite, almost grotesquely boring and routine. Seeing at close range the mundanity of Epstein and his fellow elites, how simple and childish they could be, was a sickening experience of its own. The worst call by far was with a woman who told me she'd been groped by Epstein, an incident she said she didn't report at the time out of fear of retribution from Epstein. I had been aggressively counseled to remind the readers of Mother Jones that an appearance in the address book is not evidence of any crime, or of complicity in any crime, or any knowledge of the crime. They weren't all elites, thankfully. Sometimes I would have delightful conversations with normal people who'd cleaned a car or given Epstein a facial, and only shared in my distaste for Epstein and his circle. Sometimes I would call a number that had changed hands at some point since the book was compiled, and instead of reaching the governor or fashion designer I was looking for, I'd end up with just a normal bloke on the line, some poor recipient of a torrent of wrong number phone calls of the worst variety imaginable. Their fate was a twisted inversion of my own. The oligarchy wouldn't stop calling them. Yeah, man, people keep calling me up asking for Muffy, and I'm like, I'm just always polite, man. That's Elijah Hutch, a 22-year-old aspiring music producer who lives in Flatbush in Brooklyn. He has the old cell phone number for Muffy Potter, wife of world-famous plastic surgeon Cheryl Aston, and the 4th greatest socialite in history, according to Town & Country magazine. They'll text me about some dinner I went to or how it was great seeing me with so-and-so, and I'm always just respectful, man, and let them know, hey, man, I think Muffy gave you the wrong number. Eli had no idea who Muffy was, or Epstein for that matter, and almost didn't want to explain it to him. But I did. The child sex ring, the princess, the presidents, the suicide, the black book, everything. Out of all the people I spoke to, Eli had by far the most cogent analysis of the situation. Damn, man, this is all sounding so strange. Find Eli Hutch on SoundCloud here. The haunting lyrics of Go Away give you the strength as they did to me. Awake at my desk at 4 a.m. so I could call every pedophile in London. And it goes on, for a while. But that was kind of the first part that I really liked. Some of these conversations are just, crazy. That was Epstein's MO, Julie said. He'd take some rich guy and introduce him to a girl. This is human trafficking at its finest, at its most explicit. I think the interesting thing about all of this is, if a Mother Jones reporter has this, which is basically a client list compiled by a butler, you want to tell me that the government hasn't seen this already? Because if we know its provenance, it was confiscated from the butler who went to jail for not revealing it. You want to tell me a client list doesn't exist? Come on. It appears we don't even need the list. We'll just talk to this guy. We've got, seems easy enough. But this one I love. Built into the premise of Epstein, the mastermind scammer is the notion that some kind of legitimate path to a legitimate global aristocracy exists. There is no scam here. It's grifters, grifting grifters, all the way down. And I thought that was interesting. But this also, with the whole cover-up and the lack of the files right now not being released, it's kind of like, you're telling me that the government doesn't have this information, and it suddenly doesn't exist. If a reporter from Mother Jones could find something, you're telling me the entire U.S. federal government cannot manage to keep track of one list. Really? Really? We're not stupid. We're not stupid. Speaking of distractions from Epstein, we have the latest in the Tulsi Gabbard thing. Now, I wrote about this extensively in the newsletter on Saturday about the Russia hoax. It's not a hoax. And it says here, we have a retort from Susan Miller, who oversaw the 2017 intelligence assessment of Russia's efforts in the 2016 election. And says here, the former senior CIA officer who helped oversee the 2017 intelligence assessment on Russia's interference in the 2016 election says, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and the White House are, quote, lying when they claim it was an attempt to sabotage President Donald Trump. Susan Miller, a retired CIA officer who helped lead the team that produced the report about Russia's actions during the 2016 campaign, told NBC News it was based on credible information that showed Moscow sought to help Trump win the election, but that there was no sign of a conspiracy between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign. The Director of National Intelligence and the White House are lying again, Miller said. We definitely had the intel to show with high probability that the specific goal of the Russians was to get Trump elected. She added, at the same time, we found no two-way collusion between Trump or his team with the Russians at that time. Yes! I've said it before. I have said it again. It was not Trump campaign and Russia working together. It was Russia and the FSB, also behind Cambridge Analytica, that was doing it for them. Trump didn't need to call Putin and ask for a favor. Putin was already doing it because Putin would benefit from it. That's always been the story. The media narrative has gotten all sorts of which way wrong, but that's always been the story. And the fact that that's never been bigger has always bothered me. We'll keep reading. Miller spoke to NBC News after Gabbard alleged Wednesday that the 2017 intelligence assessment was based on, quote, manufactured, unquote, information as part of a, quote, treasonous conspiracy, unquote, by the Obama administration to undermine Trump and tarnish his electoral victory. Gabbard cited a 2020 report from Republicans on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which she declassified and released this week, that asserted there was insufficient information to conclude Russia had been trying to tip the scales in favor of Trump. Miller said, quote, it is clear that Trump and his followers have a script they want to follow despite the facts. She said that when her team briefed Trump and others about their assessment in 2017, they made clear there was no way to gauge the impact of the Russian information warfare on the vote, and that Trump was the country's lawful commander-in-chief. Both me and my team readily acknowledged to Trump and others in the U.S. government we briefed, we could not say if this attempt by the Russians actually worked unless someone polled every single Trump voter to see if this disinformation was what led them to vote for Trump. Both my team and I, the DCIA, Director of the CIA, said clearly in our report to Trump himself and to the Intel committees in Congress that Trump was our president. Trump thanked the CIA director for the briefing, Miller said. That part was left out by Gabbard, Miller said. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence dismissed Miller's comments. The CIA declined to comment, as they always do. Quote, out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response, Patrick Rodenbush, a spokesman for former President Barack Obama, said in a statement this week, because they're also referring Obama for criminal prosecution for trying to undermine Trump in 2017. Not that it worked. You know. It's that Miller was, and it also says here that Miller was never charged with any crime, and she said she was never disciplined in any way over the intelligence assessment. She retired during the Biden administration after 39 years with the CIA. This is much of this, and I said this in the newsletter on Saturday. One, it's a distraction against the Epstein thing, and it's kind of working because the narrative has shifted. But two, and in my mind, more importantly, it's going back to the central premise of Donald Trump's political career. And I said this at the time. How did Donald Trump get into politics? Birtherism. He was the biggest promoter of the Obama was not born in the U.S., he doesn't have a birth certificate sort of thing. No other president had ever been asked for the birth certificate ever before. As long as someone was like, oh, yes, they were born here. So it was kind of word-of-mouth verification. But then Trump, and that's how Trump got into politics in this iteration. That was the entree. Trump's beef was against Obama. And he never really had a chance to run against Obama. So this is the next best thing. Accuse Obama of undermining him. Trying to stop him from taking office. Which no one did. Trump tried to stop himself from leaving office many years later, but no one did. And so that's the constant through line. He's got to go after Obama. And this is the perfect time to release this and distract from the Epstein mess. That's what this is. Now, if Miss Gabbard, DNI Gabbard, wants to come out with much more compelling evidence of some great conspiracy, I'm welcome to hear it. If they want to come out and show how, the Obama administration was actively trying to prevent Trump from taking power, I'm welcome to hear it. But based upon her own letter that I read last week in silence because of my sound issue, that's not what they're doing. At all. And so, in my mind, this is a giant distraction. It's incredibly disingenuous. And especially considering Gabbard is a former Democrat. This is depressing on multiple levels, but most importantly, it's a giant distraction. And I think Susan Miller is an important voice in the discussion, and I will be surprised if this actually goes anywhere, but I don't think it really will. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We're gonna read through a few more things. This thread from Will Stansel I thought was rather interesting. He says, we're quite literally living through the most radical presidential administration in U.S. history, and no one in our political media notices it because being a Republican means you're a conservative. They are dramatically transforming the way our government and Constitution works in a way with no American precedent, and gleefully shredding dozens of institutions that have helped make the United States the most powerful and prosperous nation in human history. They're doing this because they hallucinate a conspiracy of domestic political enemies, made up primarily of racial, sexual, ethnic, and religious minorities, lurking behind every institution. They'll burn the country to the ground to find it. In their fevered fantasies, this conspiracy must exist, because it is the only way these groups could have secured a role in American public life. What could possibly explain the presence of immigrants and black people at colleges, media, positions of power, except a conspiracy? And honestly, no better thread to read after the Gabbard story, because as I said in my newsletter on Saturday, this is the central issue. And I've always said, Obama's election broke the country in a way that I don't think anyone understood. And Trump was a reaction, not only to Obama's complete failure to deliver on any of the hope and change he promised in 2008, but also, and I said of this, there's a core group in this country who is not going to accept a change in the composition of who is in public life and who has cultural power. And when I read this, it was like looking in a mirror. Like, yes. For once, I agree with the Will Stansel thread. Yes. It's got to be considered, because there's no way that the undesirables could have this much power, this much place in public life. And I think it really starts with Barack Obama. A brown guy got elected, and this country has never been the same. And I think that's an underrated part of what's happened in this last decade. We're still working that out. And I think it's quite interesting that, and I think he's right. I don't think we're necessarily talking about Trump in the way of rewriting American society, although in my coverage of BBB we talked about that. But we are rewriting the rules of this country, and it is in favor of a certain group over another. We're going back to the way it used to be. Because, as I said many years ago, in 2015, we are going through the death of the white Christian heteronormative narrative, and a lot of people are not ready to give it up yet for a more pluralistic narrative that's slightly more inclusive of people. And this is the result. So I thought this thread was quite good. Let's talk about this briefly, but we're going to start here first. So, polling. Wall Street Journal poll. The Democrats are so underwater it's not even funny. Republicans are doing better, but the bar's on the floor. So, here we are, and we have, favorability is down, The Democrats are a lost cause. Way down here. Republicans are trending downward, but I mean, of basically nobody likes either of these parties is the moral of the story. They just like Democrats much less. Net favorability is Republicans are down 11, Democrats are down 30, lowest in 35 years. I think to go back to find something lower, you got to go back to the 80s, or at least the early 90s, perhaps. Lowest, I mean, just depressingly sad for Democrats. According to the poll, people trust Republicans to handle illegal immigration more, plus 24, immigration, plus 17, inflation, plus 10, tariffs, plus 7, foreign policy, plus 8. The only two things Democrats are going for them are vaccine policy, D plus 8, and health care, D plus 14. I don't know how Democrats dig themselves out of this. I had kind of mentioned that I felt like Democrats would be locked out of power for the foreseeable future, and it's not looking great. Not with these numbers going around. I mean, when right now, a bulk of the country still's feeling bad about Democrats, what's your argument for 26? What's your argument for 28? Not much. I mean, the Republicans don't have to do that much better from you. They just have to not be you. I've always said it's going to be a long time before Democrats win anything again. And certainly the White House. It's going to be a long time. And this person is absolutely correct. If the GOP could come up with a more coherent plan for healthcare policy, they would be very hard to beat going forward. Yep. I don't know how Democrats fight their way out of this. And there was this thing over here, and to that point, this post was relevant. Many Democrats have vision and agenda, but the coalition is coming apart, and so the party cannot have a vision as a unified whole. The situation now is similar to the situation in 1968 to 1992, when the New Deal coalition fell apart. Back then, it was racist Southern whites who were leaving the party and tearing it apart, but since 2016, it has been Northern and urban whites who are threatening to leave the party, unless the Democrats are willing to nominate populists, which the Democrats cannot do if the Democrats are going to hold on to racial minorities as a core constituency. And I have said, for a while that, Democrats to win elections will dump the issues of minorities, by 2028. Like, that's, kind of what's going to happen. And this was kind of in response to a thread about this polling here, which is why I had them together. The Democrats cannot both represent racial minorities and give them as a core constituency and nominate the populists that half the party wants. Which means, I'll tell you what's going to happen. It's very simple. Racial minorities will get dumped in favor of Northern and urban whites and populism. And we kind of already see that with Zoran Mamdani in New York City. I'm telling you, that even goes into the Will Stansel thread of just like, as I said in the newsletter on Saturday, there are too many loud women, too many loud browns, too many loud queers, too many loud everybody. And the reality is, no one wants to hear it anymore. It's over. And it's all going to get dumped in favor of populism, even Peronism, really kind of leftist populism, which I think is actually sometimes worse, because it can be economically devastating. Ask Argentina. This is a harbinger of the future. I mean, it's a long time to 2026. Things could be different next year. It's a long time to 2028. Could be even different by then. But the way things are going now, it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all. We're going to wrap up this evening. We're going to save these stories for next week because they're kind of evergreen. But I want to stop on this one. A judge indefinitely blocks withholding Medicaid funds to Planned Parenthood. A federal judge in Boston ruled that a provision in President Trump's policy bill targeting the organization most likely amounted to retaliation. It says here, a federal judge on Monday indefinitely blocked the Trump administration from enforcing a policy that would prevent many Planned Parenthood clinics from receiving federal Medicaid reimbursements if they continue to offer abortion services. The order, issued by Judge Indira Talwani in Federal District Court in Massachusetts, extended a temporary block she'd placed on the government earlier this month. She found that the policy retaliated against Planned Parenthood in violation of its First Amendment rights and could amount to an unconstitutional legislative punishment. The lawsuit filed earlier this month came in response to a provision that introduced in the sprawling policy bill that President Trump signed into law earlier this month. The bill imposed a one-year ban on state Medicaid payments to any healthcare nonprofit that offers abortions and received more than $800,000 in Medicaid funding in 2023. Many clinics affiliated with Planned Parenthood, which provide a range of services unrelated to abortion, immediately faced a choice between altering their operations and retaining millions of dollars in funding, or facing a potentially catastrophic loss of revenue. Because almost no other nonprofits or national networks meet the $800,000 threshold set in the bill, Judge Talwani found it was easily ascertainable that the provision was targeted and intended to force Planned Parenthood's hand. Federal law already prohibits the use of federal Medicaid funds for paying for abortions, and Judge Talwani previously found that the provision was designed to indirectly squeeze clinics into dropping such services using Medicaid payments as leverage. She noted the expansive role that Planned Parenthood's umbrella organization plays in political organizing, saying that the provision could also threaten expressive activity, including advocating before Congress, supporting candidates, and communicating with voters. In withholding funding from the independent clinics that make up the organization's network, Judge Talwani wrote that the provision effectively held the potential to minimize the organization's footprint across the country. In many states, it could force clinics to vastly reduce services or close. Yeah, and they've appealed. That's going to SCOTUS. I guarantee you. That's going straight to the Supreme Court. Well, they'll probably uphold President Trump's position. But, in any case, that was kind of a late-breaking news that I found this afternoon that I thought was interesting. In case you thought they'd really given up the whole abortion thing, they haven't. They're just being more quiet about it, as they're always want to do. Alright, we'll save tragic mulattoes, Apple hiring former Israeli spies, and the boy crisis for next week, because those are always fun. Those are evergreen stories. My voice is tired. It's also time for dinner. So, I'm going to go. Thank you all so much for watching. We had a great group tonight. I appreciate it. My name is Cameron Cowan. You can find me online at Cameron Cowan on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. You can also get all my links at CameronJournal.com. And if you want to find other ways to watch the NewsHour, that's CameronJournal.com/NewsHour. The Living Joke podcast with Connor and Will be out on Wednesday, so we'll be recording at 4 p.m. Eastern Wednesday, so make sure to come by for that. We'll be on all the Cameron Journal channels at that time. We have a lot of great content at our Substack, thelivingjoke.substack.com, so make sure to check that out as well. I will see you next Monday for the Cameron Journal News Hour. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.